सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
In this edition of Global Print, dear viewer, I'm going to talk about Pakistan. Now, the reason this week's Global Print is dedicated to the India-Pakistan relationship, which has actually been frozen in stone for the last 6 years since the Pathankot attacks of January 1, 2016. After that, of course, we had the Balakot strikes in 2019, the August 5, 2019 revocation of Article 317 Jammu and Kashmir. There's been a lot of that, and you've been following the print stories on all these issues. But the reason this week's Global Print is again going to talk about the India-Pakistan relationship is because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tweet on Monday evening when he talks about the terrible humanitarian situation in Pakistan that has been provoked by the flash floods. Now, the monsoon rains in Pakistan, and especially in provinces of Balochistan as well as Sindh, has been very dire. Over 1,000 lives have been lost. There's been incredible damage to property, to crops, to life, of course, as I said. The Pakistan Planning Minister Ehsan Iqbal has said that this requires, just for Pakistan to get its feet back on the ground, would require another $10 billion. We know that Pakistan is in Pakistan's economy is in very, very poor shape. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tweet on Monday evening, and you can read that tweet on his timeline as well as here in the print, made me ask the question, what is going on between India and Pakistan? Is there anything going on at all? But before I go any further, dear viewer, I'd like to make an appeal to you, which is please do subscribe to The Print if you haven't already. You know, you will get several benefits and privileges that non-subscribers don't have. So I hope you will click on the join button, pay rupees 159. It's very little money, but you do get a wide array of offerings, of special interviews and special stories that non-subscribers don't get. So I would urge you to pay that very small sum of money, rupees 159, and subscribe. So now back to my Global Print this week on the Print's website, and now this video in which I talk about the India-Pakistan relationship. Now, Prime Minister Modi's tweet I've already told you about. He talks about how the situation in Pakistan from the flash floods is terrible. And he says, and I read briefly, saddened to see the devastation caused by the floods in Pakistan. We extend our heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims, the injured, and all those affected by this natural calamity, and hope for an early restoration of normalcy. Simultaneously, on the same day, the External Affairs Minister, Mr. S. Jaishankar, was speaking at an event of the Asia Society think tank, in which he said something quite interesting. He said that he would not be averse to it. In fact, he said he would like to see India's foreign policy, especially in South Asia, being one of non-reciprocity. Now, what does that term mean? Which is that India's huge size, position, location, population, GDP, this is that there is no need for India to demand an equality or a reciprocal relationship from its much smaller neighbors. And he said, and Mr. Jaishankar said that he hopes that India will be able to play this role in South Asia. Now, this comment by Mr. Jaishankar came in response to a question by the Sri Lankan High Commissioner to India, Mr. Milinda Boragoda. So one wonders whether Mr. Jaishankar's comment is limited to what's going on in Sri Lanka, and at the print and here in Global Print as well, we have talked in detail about the situation in Sri Lanka. But I don't think that Mr. Jaishankar is limiting himself to that relationship or to the situation inside that country. So coming together, both Mr. Jaishankar comment following Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tweet gives rise to the question, is there some sort of a rethink inside the Indian establishment on the Pakistan question? Now, there are several questions, of course, that follows from that. The first is, what has changed? Why is India even considering some sort of a rethink? You would imagine that this dire humanitarian crisis caused by the flash flooding in Pakistan, perhaps that has given rise to this rethink inside the Indian establishment, from which you would ask yourself, so does that mean that only when there is a humanitarian crisis in Pakistan should India sit up and take notice? Obviously not. The second point is, and this is highly probable, which is that last year in February 2021, when there was an agreement of peace and tranquility on the line of control, which basically meant that both sides would continue to stop firing, stop infiltrating. Well, Pakistan would stop infiltrating terrorists inside Jammu and Kashmir. And the ceasefire, which had been freeing, now the ceasefire has been, has actually was signed as long back as 2003, but in recent years it had frayed very badly. So there was an effort once again for the ceasefire on the line of control, that's between the two Kashmirs held by India and Pakistan respectively, and that there was this urgent need to revive that ceasefire. So that agreement took place last year in February, and since then, I must say, and you can look at the figures, that ceasefire has more or less held. So did that mean that the back channel between the Indian and Pakistani security establishments that brought this ceasefire to the forefront, that enabled both sides to sign on that dotted line, does this mean that the back channel was concluded at the time, or is it still in action? And I would argue that two big nuclear powers like India and Pakistan cannot afford not to have a back channel. So it's more than likely, more than possible, that the security establishments in both countries are in touch with each other. And one example of that is that recently a few Indian Air Force officers were sacked because of the so-called accidental firing of a missile in March earlier this year. And now you would ask yourself that, first of all, how does something like that happen? A missile get accidentally misfired. But what was even more interesting was that Pakistan actually did not make a hue and cry about it, which gave rise to the suspicion that as soon as this happened, the Indian establishment must have gotten in touch with the Pakistanis and told them that, look, this is an accident. Nobody's firing a missile in your territory and violating your sovereignty. Because if that was true, if that would be true, then that would be deemed certainly a hostile act, an act of war even. So to avoid any kind of misunderstandings, it is more than likely that the Indian establishment would have gotten in touch with the Pakistani side and told them that, look, this was a mistake and that this should never have happened. So please do hold your horses. And then a few days ago, we know that these three officers of the Indian Air Force were sacked summarily to assuage Pakistan as well as the international community that India as a nuclear power, as a missile power, is a responsible power, and that it takes its responsibilities, especially on these fronts, very, very seriously. So this shows, dear viewer, that there is definitely some sort of a back channel on. And on the question of the humanitarian aid, a possible humanitarian aid to Pakistan in the wake of these devastating floods, perhaps there is an ongoing conversation between the two. There is a third point, and this is from Pakistan. Their Commerce Minister, Mr. Miftah Ismail, has said that he will be ready, that the Pakistani government of Shehbaz Sharif will be ready to reopen the Wagah border in order to import directly some sort of fruits and vegetables from India to alleviate the hardship that people are being forced to undergo because of the devastating floods. Now, the question is that will this opening be limited just to buy this sort of little bit of vegetables, or could this lead to a greater interaction between the two sides, to greater trade, and perhaps in the future to greater normalcy? Right now, I'm not so sure until this alleged back channel really pulls off a few surprises. Because if you remember, dear viewer, last year in the wake of the ceasefire between the two countries, between India and Pakistan, there was a move on the Pakistani side to reopen trade in cotton and sugar. The Pakistan Commerce Ministry went ahead, in fact, even announced that this trade would be reopened. But Imran Khan, who was then Prime Minister, quickly put an end to it. And he said that India has to first take steps to reverse the revocation of Article 370 that gave special status to Jammu and Kashmir. And only then Pakistan would normalize the relationship with India. In fact, at the time when Imran Khan was Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif was then in the opposition. And he taunted Imran Khan about this possible reopening between India and Pakistan. Now, today the tables have been turned in Pakistan, as you know. Imran Khan is in the opposition and Shehbaz Sharif is Prime Minister. And even though Shehbaz Sharif's brother, Nawaz Sharif, who remains in exile in London, had always been very keen to promote a normalized relationship between India and Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif is obviously not the same man as his brother. Having said that, the political scenario right now in Pakistan is quite difficult. There is the economy, which is going through a huge crisis. And now you have the floods. So the question is, according to the Indian side, India seems to be ready to reopen some sort of a dialogue with Pakistan without any preconditions. The Indian side is saying that it is Pakistan that's putting these preconditions, which is that they demand some sort of a reversal of the position in Jammu and Kashmir to the pre-August 5, 2019 position. However, the Pakistanis are also very realistic people, and especially the Pakistan Army Chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa. And remember that the ceasefire between the two countries could not have taken place without Mr. Bajwa's say-so. In fact, he and his military establishment would have been very closely involved with India's security establishment. Now, General Bajwa is going to retire in a couple of months' time. So the question is there going to be some sort of peace moves before he retires? Because clearly the politicals, both Imran Khan and Shehbaz Sharif, are locked into this sort of do or die kind of political crisis. In any case, the Pakistan Army is such a powerful institution and practically runs Pakistan's foreign policy, especially if it has to do with India. So if General Bajwa, who was very instrumental in bringing together the ceasefire between the two countries, then could he also persuade the Shehbaz Sharif government to reopen or to respond to the Indian government's moves on, say, perhaps, if there will be some moves? We know that right now there hasn't been anything beyond PM Modi's tweets and Jaishankar's comments. But if there is something else, could there be a response from the Pakistani side as well, a positive response? Now, these things are very, very closely orchestrated, completely behind the scenes. So that back channel, I'm sure, dear viewer, is doing alive and well between India and Pakistan, or at least between the two establishments. Now, we don't know at which level and who is involved, but you can be rest assured that the senior leadership in India is fully in the know of what's going on. So if India makes a move, offers humanitarian aid, what could be the response? Could again the political leadership in Pakistan say that no, there must be something on Jammu and Kashmir, there must be some give on India's part? Now, clearly India is not going to go back to Article 370. So short of that, perhaps there is some move towards statehood for Jammu and Kashmir. But again, that has been caught up in the controversy over a fair revision of electoral rolls. So right now, like we say in Hindi, phuk phuk ke kadam dono sides bhar rahe hain, both India and Pakistan. So I would argue that India, as the much larger country, just exactly what External Affairs Minister Mr. Jaishankar said, should not demand reciprocity from its much smaller neighbors. In this case, because Pakistan is undergoing a serious crisis, a serious humanitarian crisis, it behoves its much larger neighbor, India, to be able to be far more generous than it has been already. Open the doors, open the gates, offer trade, offer any kind of aid that Pakistan needs. If Pakistan doesn't want it, it will say so. But this is not the time to play politics between the two countries. I would urge you to read my column, Global Print, and also I look forward to your comments on this video. Thank you so much for watching.